Have you ever wanted to give a speech? Have you ever wanted to get up in front of a crowd and deliver a keynote that moves people? Perhaps you're afraid to do it. Perhaps public speaking is one of your biggest fears. Well, that's what I'm hoping to address in today's video, which is a little bit different. This video is a little bit different to my usual videos. I thought I'd bring you inside my process, how I go about writing, preparing, practicing, and delivering a keynote speech. Because in about a month's time, I've got to deliver one. So I thought it was a great opportunity to bring you along on this journey, to show how I create these speeches, in the hope that I can teach you something so that you can go out there and present your own speeches if this is something that you really want to do. But also I believe that learning how to speak, learning how to communicate with people is really important life skill that we all need to develop. Because going out there and meeting people, connecting with them, talking to them, sharing ideas, I think is one of the greatest things about being alive. There's so many interesting, amazing people out there in the world. And some of my best memories, some of the richest experiences I've had in my life have been those times when I've just been sitting with someone, perhaps in another country, in another world, just talking, sharing ideas, sharing backgrounds, sharing knowledge. It's one of the great things about being alive. And that's one of the reasons why I love to do these speeches, these conferences. And I've been incredibly fortunate throughout my life and throughout my career to deliver so many of these. I've lost count of how many I've actually done, 8 or 9 different countries, 60, 70 different conferences. And every time I meet new people, I learn new things, and that's why I continue to do them. And this conference I've got to do in about a month's time, I'm going to be speaking about some of the things that we've been talking about recently in my videos. How do you redesign your life? How do you create the life that you want to live? And how do you get out of that optimization trap of continually trying to improve your life without setting a strong foundation? So I thought it was a good time to bring those two together to talk about that concept and how I would convey it in a keynote speech, but at the same time teaching you some skills that you may be able to use in your work or in your life to communicate better with people, to share your knowledge and your experiences, and to just live a richer and more fuller life. So I hope this is of use. I'll be doing another one in a few weeks' time, talking about the next step of this evolution, but today it's about planning the speech and how I go about creating the speech itself. So the first thing I do when I sit down to write a speech is to think of one truth. I think it was Ernest Hemingway who said, "You've just got to write one true sentence." And it's true of fiction writing, but I found it incredibly true of trying to write a speech. It's coming back to that one core message that I want people to walk away from the talk with, to reflect upon. And so in this case, for this conference that we're doing, I think that the speech, that core element that's going to be at the center of the entire talk, is going to be around the biggest mistake that you're making in your life. And that's going to be about optimizing the wrong life. That's the core idea. We're all optimizing the wrong life. We're not building from a strong foundation. And I think that once I've got that sort of idea down, I like to simplify it down even further than that, make it at its core element. And that's about foundation, right? It's that word that comes in. Is your foundation right? Because everything you're going to be building upon on top of that needs to be built on a strong foundation. Otherwise, it won't stay. Otherwise, it won't remain stable. Once I've got this core thing at the bottom of my speech, I'm able to then build upon that, ironically enough. I'm able to build upon that and create the speech and craft the speech around it. Now, I tend to follow a similar formula when I'm writing my speeches. And I like to start my speeches in one of two ways. Either I'll start with a story, and that's likely going to be a story where my aim in telling the story is getting people to hear my story, but feel their own lived experience, so that there's a relatability, so that they know that I'm talking about something that is relevant to them, that they can connect to and perhaps learn from. So that's the core aim if I'm starting with a story. There's several different ways you can start a keynote, but I tend to prefer the story, or what I'm going to do probably in this case is to start with a question. I'm going to start with a question because that immediately gets people thinking. It immediately gets them into the story, into the concept, into the speech itself. And for something like this, I'll probably start with that question I spoke about before, which is, what is the biggest mistake? Mistake you've made. Now, people, when they hear that, if I start with that, are probably going to start thinking about obvious things, mistakes they've made in their life, bad decisions. And then I'm going to throw them for a loop, probably, because I'm going to offer up the idea that the biggest mistake that they've made in their lives is one that they probably didn't even realize that they made. And I always believe that it's important when you're creating a speech is to put a little piece of intrigue in there. You want people to kind of lean in and think, oh, hang on a second, what are you talking about? I thought the biggest mistake that I made in my life was leaving that job, or going on that holiday, or buying that car, or making that investment. What do you mean it's one that I don't realize I've made? That's intriguing. And at that point, you're starting to hook them in, you're starting to get them involved. And to deepen that connection, I think in this case, I might follow up with a second question. And I don't normally run two questions one after the other at the start of a speech. One's normally enough to get people to lean in. But I think in this instance, there's something that we can do to really complete that lean in, to really get anyone who's not in fully in. And because I know that this sort of a talk is going to be focusing on optimization and the way that we over-optimize our lives, and given the fact that I know that this audience that I'm going to be speaking to is largely going to be designers, I know that there's probably a pretty high chance that there's a lot of people in the audience who are going to have devices, have, whether they're like Fitbits or smartwatches or those rings or all of those sort of life optimization tools. So there's probably going to be a pretty high chance that a large majority of the people in the audience will have used or will be using one of those tools. So that's an interesting second question, because if I'm going to start talking about the fact that we live over-optimized lives, I want to demonstrate to people that they actually are doing it. So I think I might follow up that question about mistakes with maybe a show of hands question. How many people in the audience have used or are using those devices? Because I'm guessing there's a lot of people that will put their hand up. And then I want to do a follow-up question. And it's probably going to be something along the lines of who thinks that they have everything in their life sorted out, under control. Some sort of question like that, because I'm going to guess that there's going to be a lot of people put their hand up for the first part of that, but not as many people keeping it up for the second, which will allow me to then make the segue into the fact that we over-optimize our lives. And it's a continual pursuit to just continually optimize what we have without really focusing on the foundation or the real reason behind why we do it. So I think this eventually I think this sort of blends together the question and the story start to speeches, because all of a sudden I'm asking people to question. I'm telling them a bit of a story that they can relate to in their lives. Yes, they probably optimize a lot of things about their lives, but have they really thought about it? So I'm hoping that by starting in this way, I can really have people bought into the speech. And that's really the key to starting any speech strongly. You really want people almost from the very start to be bought in. I know a lot of speakers like to get up on stage and start doing things about, talking about their background or justifying why they're there, or really starting with something inane, but I think you really just want to go straight in. You want to really engage directly. People are there in the audience to learn. They're there to connect. And they may have seen several other speakers by the time you get up to speak. So you really want to start with something that grabs their attention, something that hooks them in. Once I've got people hooked in, I really want to take the next step, and that's really about setting the scene. I studied screenwriting at university. I used to love film and the hero's journey and all of those great storytelling structures. And I believe that setting the scene is really important, because now that I've got people bought in, now that I've got them really relating to what I'm going to be started to talk about, I want to set the scene. I want them to relate to me. I want to perhaps share a story about my own personal experiences going through living an over-optimized life, the way that I didn't necessarily see that that's what I was doing. And so by setting the scene, I'm enabling people to effectively layer themselves on top of that scene, to actually see how it would fit with their own lives, and to see just how much of a problem it is. Because I think that you can quickly lose, even if you hook people in strongly, you can quickly lose them if the speech is actually not irrelevant to them. You know, you could jump up on stage and let off fireworks, and all of a sudden everyone's going to wake up and really wonder what you're doing. But then if you start talking about a topic that has no interest to them or that's not relatable to them, they're going to quickly tune out. So what I tend to like to do next is to really set the scene, to allow people to kind of paint their own picture about how do the way that they live sort of interact with what I'm going to be starting to talk about, because then they're starting to write the story in their own heads. So I'm sort of acting more like a guide rather than someone who's telling them what to do. I'm actually asking them to sort of tell the story themselves. And I think that's an important way to, again, deepen that connection and hopefully convey a message that will help people at the end. And I think an important part of setting that scene is actually looking at the cost of not changing, the cost of not doing anything. It's almost like when you go back to the hero's journey story, that sort of, there's a step around heeding the call and not necessarily going after going on the quest. But you need to look at what the consequences are of not doing that. And in this sense, what I want to talk about is the fact that, like, not living an optimized life or living an over-optimized life tends to lead to drift. It leads to burnout. It leads to that sense of not being connected with what you want to create from your life. So I want to paint this picture for people about how they need to actually go on this journey. They need to actually align themselves, or else this will happen. Now, it doesn't have to be too dire, and I haven't quite settled on what the sort of the cost of not moving, the cost of not going on the quest will be. But I think at this stage of the speech, once I've done the immediate initial part and everyone's kind of locked on and lent in, then the next part, I will set the scene, allow them to sort of start painting their own picture and putting their own story onto my story. And then what I will do from there is actually show them the cost of not moving. Once we've looked at the cost of not moving, then I think the next step is actually to start to move towards the solution. In the case of this speech, I don't have a great deal of time. It's about 25 to 30 minutes for the speech. So I can't spend too long going over the cost. Plus, people don't want to be talking about the negative elements. They're there to learn, they're there to change, they're there to develop. So I want to start to give them some way out of this. But the first thing I'm going to need to do is break down any preconceived notions that they have. I need to reframe the problem from one that they're aware of to one that they actually want to change. And a great analogy I use here is, I want my speech to go from being a vitamin, something that you know you should take but probably don't, to being a medicine, which is something that you take. If a doctor prescribes you medicine, you take it. So I want my speech to shift from being a vitamin, oh, that's nice to know, yeah, I feel a bit weird, but I kind of know all of that, I'm not going to listen, to something that makes them feel like, yeah, I want to change, I want to create my own life, I want to create the life that I want to live. And I think that in the case of this speech, because most of the audience are actually going to be designers, I want to reframe it in a way where we look at life as a design problem. The way that we live can be designed. You can approach it in the same way that you would approach a design brief, a design challenge, to do the research, to understand, to apply design systems, to actually create a solution that works for you. And by drawing them together in that way, I think people will be able to really connect with what I'm saying, because that will be their background. That will be the world that they understand, the world that they live day in, day out. So that reframing allows them to start to see how, hey, I do have the tools to change this. So it might not be as hopeless or as difficult as I first thought. And I think once I get that mindset shift in the audience, I'm hopefully then going to be able to help provide some suggestions from my experience about how they could go about redesigning their lives, but then certainly open it up for them as talented designers to start crafting their own design solutions for how they want to create their lives. Because once we've shifted that mindset, then the very next step is going to be about providing some solutions. Now, I don't want to provide solutions in the way that it might come across me saying, this is what you have to do. I'm going to be talking more around, this is what I've done, and this is my design system. I'm going to be talking about the experience compass. But the key thing about the experience compass is that it's not necessarily a system that gives you step-by-step instructions about what to do. It's actually empowering you to chart your own course. So I think it will work quite well in this environment, because these designers will all have great techniques and skills and ability to create solutions and to design solutions to problems. So giving them this reframing, hopefully will give them some bravery to actually try things that are a little bit different, push themselves out a little bit, and change the ways that they've been approaching things in the past. Because if they are feeling a little bit negative, or if they are feeling like they're not really designing the lives that they want to live, then by reframing it in this way and showing, well, you've got the skills already, and here's maybe another idea about how you can harness those skills and deploy them in a new way, it can hopefully show them a new path to chart the next step that they want to go on. And once I've offered up that idea, that suggestion about a way to start redesigning your life, I want to bring the talk back to some empowerment. And most of the talks I do tend to end with a challenge, a rallying call, a way to sort of leave the audience with the feeling of excitement that, hey, I can do this. Hey, I'm going to go out and do this. As soon as I get back home from this conference, I'm going to start taking active steps forward. So it's like a conclusion in a traditional essay. It brings things back to the main point. It reminds them that they do have the power to change. And hopefully throughout this journey of the story that we've shared and the experience that we've shared together over the last 25, 30 minutes, they're now able to take that next step or feel empowered to take that next step. And I feel that's a nice way to end most of the talks, because I want people to not just necessarily think, that was a good talk, I enjoyed it, but actually think, I now want to go out and change something. I want to go and do something. That was the inspiration I needed to now go out and do something different in my life or in my work or whatever it is. That's, I find, the most fulfilling way for me to often end these speeches, to actually challenge people to make a change. Because in that environment where you're sitting in a theater all day and you're watching lots of speakers, it can be pretty easy to become just another speaker. So how do I challenge you to not just take the expected path, not take that sort of disconnected autopilot path of, oh yeah, great, I'll do it later, but actually challenge yourself to change. So hopefully that's given you some insight into how I go about structuring or thinking about the structure of a speech. I start with that story or that question, get people leaning in, start to set the scene, allow them to apply and paint their own story, put their own story on top of this scene that I'm setting, and see how what I'm about to tell them does relate to them, does connect to them. Show them the cost of not changing. Offer them a solution about how they can take a step towards where they want to be. And then wrap it up with a challenge. Don't just forget about this. Don't just assume that you know it. Go out and start implementing this change. And this framework tends to work across various speeches, whether I'm doing speeches like this, which is more about designing your life, or speeches about your business or your brand or customer experience, or more of the corporate work. It tends to follow this same pattern. And I found it to be a really great way to use traditional storytelling techniques to create a really engaging and connected keynote. So thank you for watching today. Thank you for staying with me. Hopefully, over the next course of the next couple of these videos, as I prepare this speech, I'll talk a little bit more about what I've actually put in the speech, some of the stories I'll be sharing, how I create my slides, how I practice the speech, and just some tips about, talking in public and how you can come across with more confidence and more impact when you speak. So hopefully that's been useful. If it has, subscribe, follow along, and thank you for joining me.